Let's go.
So, hello, hi, I'm Amanda. So my name is Amanda Thebe, and I have called this talk the Menopocalypse because I have actually written a book by that name. It's in the first draft. I'm editing it at the moment, and it's awful. It's like the worst part of writing a book. I've totally lost interest in doing it, but I'm going to get it finished because it seems to me that it's an important subject and people aren't talking about it enough. You know, we're at a stage now where people really don't have any more taboos anymore, so we should be able to talk about things in the open without being ashamed, and I know that still exists a little bit. So that I just kept the name the same, and the book is it's the Modern Woman's Guide to Surviving Menopause. And so what I've decided to do is, well, I'm doing a few talks, but you're actually going to be my guinea pigs, because even though I haven't brought the whole presentation with me, this is basically the upshot of what I do in the presentation. And I sort of want to get your feedback as well as we're going along, so feel free to interrupt, ask questions. I'm okay with that. But first of all, let me just tell you about myself and why I'm here talking about menopause, because like in a million years I didn't think I would be stood in front of people talking about menopause. It's like, what the hell's happened to me here? So and also with the book, I always knew I wanted to write a book, and as I was writing the book, I'm like, I'm writing a book about menopause. What the hell's happened? I've done all these adventures in my life, and now I'm... But so what's basically happened is I've been in the fitness industry probably as long as this guy here, like forever. No, like it's got to be about 20 years. I come from like an IT design background, but fitness has always been there, and then it became my primary career about 5 years ago when I was based in Toronto with a young family, and it just was one of those businesses that really fit my lifestyle, because, you know, family first. And then so that's where I was. I had lots of clients like David, maybe about 40, 50 clients, and I would say 80% of them were like me. So there were women in their 40s and, you know, and beyond. I had some that were in their 80s. It was amazing. And a few teenage girls as well, but the chunk of the clients were women my age. And so when I entered my 40s, I pretty much think I was in like the best shape ever. I couldn't believe it. Like, I'd always exercised all my life. I've been an athlete, but I'm a DBRT master trainer. So I teach the sandbags. I do a lot of functional training like Dave does. Like, our philosophies are aligned completely. And so I was feeling really, really good. But then I started to feel a little bit strange and unwell, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what was going on. I couldn't work it out. And then in the same time, as a parallel, I had clients coming to me, women saying, you know, I'm not feeling great today. I think it's the menopause. And then I insert the eye roll going, yeah, okay, whatever. Because I knew nothing about it, and think, Jesus, lady, all that's going to happen is you're going to not have your period for 12 months and you have a few hot flashes and get on with it. And I was so dismissive that I literally hold my hands up and apologize to every woman that I've done that to. And then, so this was happening, and then all of a sudden I just started to feel very unwell. And I actually remember the day it happened. I'd been to a boxing class and been pretty much aggressively boxing. It was probably too hard, the class I'd done. But I was feeling good. And then I went home and I had to lie down, and I couldn't get back up. I just couldn't get back out of bed, and I just was like, something doesn't feel right. And for about 2 or 3 days, I sort of struggled to move around, and I had like a symptom of vertigo. And then I started being sick, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I just didn't feel well. But it went, and I got up and forgot about it, and then it sort of kept happening. I kept having these really strange bouts of vertigo, and then violent throwing up, and then like crawling on the floor, not being able to function, and thinking, this is really strange. So I went to the doctors and said, listen, I don't feel good. I feel really unwell, actually. My vision's blurred, like I feel sick, I'm forgetting things, and I'm going like brain tumor, you know, like, because like, where do you go? Like, worst place, well, I did. And so for a year and a half, I had tests, MRIs, tests, like CAT scans, and I was seeing an ear, nose and throat, neurologist. I was having balance testing done, where they strap you to a board and like fling you around and put water in your ear to induce vertigo. And it all came out that there was clearly something not right, but it was inconclusive. And I was at my wit's end, like literally thinking, is this the new me? Is this what I have to do, like, to get through life, is feel this shitty? And I don't even know why, when, like, I've literally invested half of my life eating the right foods, exercising intelligently, not even just overtraining, but being really healthy with my, like, stress and my sleep. You know, I had all of it figured out, and I just couldn't work it out. So I think it was about a year and a half later, I go to my gynecologist, routine gynecology test, and he sat down and he said, is everything okay? And I just burst into tears, like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm like, I literally wear iron knickers. I do not cry. Like, I'm British, you know, like, there's a waterproof one, we've got a soldier on, and I don't cry. And I couldn't stop crying. I was like, I just don't know what's happening to the quality of my life. It's just nosedived. And he was like, yes, just sounds like you're suffering from migraines. It's pretty a symptomatic thing of perimenopause, you know, to have migraines with aura, so without a headache, which I didn't have. And he was like, it can be debilitating, it can be miserable. And how's your mental health? How are you coping? You know, I just started crying again. And I think he literally cued me into that. I was depressed as well. I had depression. And both of these things were like horrifying to me, because then he said, are you having any hot flashes? And I went, we have to like stop right here, because dude, I'm like 43 years, at the time I was 40, I'm 43 years old, I am not having hot flashes, like back off. Or flushes, I forget which country I'm in. We're flushes, we flush in America, right? We don't flash. We flash here.
Yeah.
We flush, when you go to England you flush. Just so you know, there's a difference.
That's the toilet.
Yeah, you do. No, you pull the chain in the toilet. We actually do say we pull the chain. So he basically says, we can run some blood tests, but I know that this is what's going on. I see this all day long. And I'm like, well, why doesn't anybody know about this? Why isn't anybody telling me this information? Like, why am I having to spend a year and a half with specialists who are experts in their area to be fobbed off, to be dismissed? And I'm pretty good at advocating for myself. You know, I don't mind saying, I'm not happy with this outcome, what else can we do? And I still didn't get anywhere. So now I knew I had a depression, and I had this migraine with an aura. It put things into perspective, and I could start to do things to feel better. And that's always the case, isn't it? Like, when you're worried about something, and if you're in chronic pain or discomfort, it's hard to be positive when you constantly getting knocked down through everyday things. And so that sort of was like the start of my menopause journey, and then I just started like talking about it. I remember writing this one article I was sent to Dave. This is what sort of kicked it off for me. I wrote this one article, and it was called "The Shite That Your Mother Doesn't Tell You About Menopause," because my mum didn't tell me anything, right? Well, I know, like, it's like a generational thing for sure, like, and their mothers definitely didn't. They just got on with it, right? And so my mum, when I approached her, I said, Mum, the doctor said I've got migraine. She went, oh, I had them when I had menopause. I went, listen, Mum, for 2 years I've been like, felt like I was dying. And she went, it wasn't the same for me. And I went, but you didn't even think? She was like, anyway, it turned, I mean, I think I was early. I'm in full menopause now, and I'm 48 next week, if you want to send me a birthday card. But that's pretty early as far as like full menopause, because we know it can go into the towards the 60s. And so just that lack of communication between my mom and I was like, I could see that could have eased a lot of my discomfort. So I'm like, we have to start talking, right? And then I even rolled it back even further and thought to myself, you know what, like, even in the schools, in sex education classes, whatever they call it now, I forget, like our health classes, they talk about birth and how that happens. They talk about like puberty in depth. They talk about pregnancy in depth. And they even talk about post and pre-pregnancy in school now. They don't even touch on the end of your sexual health, right? You know, like the end of the child rearing years. And so it's just not even a subject worthy of discussion yet. Half of the population are going to go through it. It makes no sense to me. So I'm sort of like on this mission now to just like start talking about it. And then what happened is I wrote this article, and it didn't like go viral. That's a big lie. Like probably 20 people read it, but then it went like that. You know, like it expanded, and then I had all these women coming to me saying, "Thank you. Like this is things we've been feeling, and nobody talks about it. It's very frustrating. And what can we do? What's the solution? What's the fix?" And so straight away I was like, we have to change our language completely, because this doesn't need fixing. This is something you have to go through. So even just the way we approach the whole menopause subject about like needing to get find like a cure, it was something I've heard, like, and it's not a disease, is it? Like this is clearly a very challenging time for women, from one extreme to the other. I still plenty with this. From one extreme to the other. Like, you know, there's some people fly through it. I wish them luck. I hate them all, of course. But then there's those on the other end of the spectrum, and I do feel like I was in that end of the spectrum, and I think that I was given this gift of every symptom in its extreme so that I could talk about it. That's what I think menopause's gift to me was. But so the language that's spoken about, and when you read the literature, so that's what I started doing. I started digging. And I either found that the literature out there, either on websites or medical sites, was either dry and so unappetizing that you just don't want to read it, right? Or see, we had the cell phone conversation, I'm just joking. And so then the other extreme is like the women who just want to like joke about it only. And I love humor. But you should always want to take away from something. You should always read something and feel like you've been given something at the end, like a knowledge bomb. And I didn't, these books were too flippant. They were too funny. I actually wanted somebody to tell me what to do to be the best I could be during menopause. Tell me some of the facts that are out there that are not myths, that people just make up. There's so much shit out there. I just was like, I'm going to just pull all of the good stuff and bring it here, all of the stuff that I can find evidence that backs it, not like take black collash, because my neighbour 3 doors down said she took it, doesn't have hot flashes, or eat keto because that's the way you have to eat in menopause. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm not saying that isn't true, but why? Show me how. Like, at least show me some evidence, or even if it's anecdotal, like, tell me really the truth. We need the truth now. So that's sort of how it started for me. And then what happened is, over that time, I found the things that worked for me, and I found the things that didn't work for me based on the information that I researched, right? And so that's sort of what we'll talk about when I talk about the hacks. I talk about like the Menopocalypse hacks, the things that you can do to take control of like some elements of your life, because there's some things you literally have to let happen, but there's other stuff that you have a handle on. And that, as usual, in health, it's the small little things that make a difference, right? Usually it's not big mountains you have to climb, it's small steps that snowball you into a better place. Like think about like when you want to lose weight. Anyone can lose weight quickly if you starve yourself, because it's a calorie deficit, right? But what happens when you stop? You just fall back on the wagon, sort of thing. And so, but if you do it in a habitual way, where you make these small changes, you start adding protein to every meal. All of a sudden, you eat protein and you don't even realize you're doing it. It's that type of thing that works. And we know that scientifically, because it changes the neuroplasticity of your brain. So we know that small changes are very impactful. So I sort of wanted to do this more as like a workshop-y type thing. So like to ask, like what were because when I've looked at symptoms and what menopause is, it's like the list can go into the hundreds, but honestly, I sometimes think that people then start looking for menopause as their excuse, if that makes sense. I'm feeling this, oh, it's got to be menopause. And I'm like, no, well, let's just talk about the ones that we know are actual symptoms because of falling estrogen in your body. Like, because there is certain symptoms out there, and they're like the big rocks that I like to talk about. But when we talk about menopause, I'm going to be like a teacher. I love this. Okay, children. So we have, if I was Victorian, I'd have a stick. And then we have, so there's 3 stages of menopause. Did we know that? Yes. So I feel like I'm talking to educated people here, which is nice. But you still got used to that. And you're a doctor?
Yeah.
Also, of what?
I used to do surgery and now I do general practice.
Great. And so one of my big things is when people go to their general practitioner, that the general practitioners listen to the patients. Because one of the biggest feedbacks I've ever got from women, I have a closed Facebook group that only talks about menopause. And it seems to be that, you know, you get 15 minutes for every patient. So it's very difficult to find out everything that's going on in that small period of time, right? But a lot of women go and they'll get dismissed and go, yeah, it's just menopause, off you go. You know, just.
Many times I spend an hour of it.
I can see, because you're here, like you're the but it makes a difference, right? You actually care, and so that's clear because you're here. But there's a lot of doctors out there now being so progressive. It's really great. I feel like things are changing.
The ones that take insurance,
They take insurance, they got to see a lot. So
they have to see a lot in order to compensate for the.
And that's the difference between like the different healthcare systems throughout the world, right? And I've lived in three. I've lived in the National Health Service in the UK, where everything's free, but sometimes the care has been a little bit inadequate, you know, because the resources aren't there, or you have to wait a long time to be referred to a specialist. To a gynecologist can take months, which is not helpful either. And then in Canada, where it's a bit of both, you know, you've got the free healthcare from your province, and then you can pay as well. And then here, where you need insurances. So I've seen and lived it all. Anyway, so even if you know this, I'm going to go through it because it's just really helpful just to remind ourselves. So you've got peri, meno, and post. And peri is known as the time leading up to menopause, which is typically the most symptomatic time. And it's typically the most confusing time. And that's sort of when I talk about menopause, I'm typically always talking about this, because that's when most people start experiencing symptoms that don't make any sense to them. And I think that that's the bit that I'm trying to sort of clear up. And for me, it started about the age of 38, but it can, medically, it can be any time from 35 onwards. We can see some changes. And these, like I said, these symptoms can vary a lot. You know, they can start being very mild, or they can get really extreme. But and we can get irregular periods, and until we get to this stage. And menopause is the time when you haven't had a menstrual period for 12 months, right? And then the old Amanda would be like, okay, so I haven't had a period for 12 months. Hooray, let's burn our sanitary pads and now go forth. But it sort of isn't that easy, is it? We know that symptoms can still continue, and they can still continue until you die. And that's what I think is really important to talk about, right, as well, because when you're postmenopausal, so this sort of melts into one another. You hit this goalpost of menopause, and then you're postmenopausal, right? And when you're postmenopausal, if we go back just down through from an evolutionary perspective, we would be born, have our menstrual cycle, so we could have babies, and then we would stop having babies, and then we'd die, right? And then the place from menopause till death, we just keep expanding, right? Which is a good thing in my eyes. But it means that what's happening is some women are facing challenges into their 70s and 80s still. That's all because of the lack of our hormones in our body. And so I like to talk about obviously that too. So that's the menopause. So what I want you to do is to shout out, and so we'll write down some of the symptoms that are most typical in menopause. That's what I'd like to go through. So I'm going to get rid of.
I only had one, and that was what?
Being hated by Amanda.
I said I only had one. It was anger.
Oh.
Being hated by Amanda, not me.
No, she said it.
Because I'm that person that you hate because they were just like, oh, freedom, yay.
But that's what you are, that one. You just went through it. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And you've had no symptoms at all.
I had tiny little hot flashes, but it was more like, oh look, I'm not cold anymore.
Yeah.
That's how I was.
Yeah.
That's how I was in the winters.
It's
Yeah.
crazy,
I could
isn't
go out
it?
to dinner and just wear a blouse. I loved it. I didn't have to wear 2 sweaters and like I used to.
It wasn't so distressing for me either. Yeah.
But I mean, I still have hot flashes, and now they're not so fun.
No, and that's the thing, and we'll talk about that. And so these are 2 different things. It's all to do with the regulatory system of your temperature in your body, right? But and by the way, when I talk about this, I'm a layman's researcher, right? I'm a nutrition coach and a personal trainer for 20 years, and I've lived this experience, and I've studied it as well. But I stay in my lane. I'm not a doctor, and I know that, right? But I work with doctors and other healthcare professionals, and so I have a really good understanding of it. But just so you know, when people start asking me things about should I take HRT, I'm like, go and see your doctor, because that's not my job. And so we've got hot flashes, night sweats, and so for me, I had migraines. Okay, and anything else?
Marianne had anger issues.
Yeah. Mood, anger.
I was really crabby.
And like coping skills, right?
But I was living with some very annoying people.
So she can't tell.
Were they,
really tell.
It was not your fault.
That's right.
no, I mean, were they like breathing too loud? Because like literally sometimes.
Breathing too loud.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. That's where I was.
yeah.
Making too much noise.
Irritable then, right? Not just angry, you're like highly
No,
triggered.
I
But the anger,
I would get angry, my head would spin.
Yeah. It's like an anger you have. It's like the
And I wasn't like that
no,
before.
Exactly.
Or still.
And we do talk about where we are like now and where it, like the positives as well. And this isn't just all doom and gloom, because there's some huge positives that I love to talk about through menopause as well. So we've got the anger, coping issues. We're going to talk about the genitourinary symptoms of syndrome of menopause, which is vaginal atrophy. I get to say vagina a lot, and I love it. Because apparently it's one of the most hated words.
Atrophy?
Yeah, atrophy. I couldn't spell it.
That's pretty bad.
It's such a bad word for atrophy. Vagina and moist are up there as 2 of the worst words to say. So now I just find moist. I actually struggle with moist unless it's a cake. I don't think you should say moist.
Never thought about it.
So we have hot flashes and night sweats, and migraines are some of the typical ones. The coping skills, anger, irritability, all of those. The vaginal atrophy, which we will talk about. In my book, I call it "Let's Not Beat About the Bush," because we literally are all about the bush. And other things are mental health issues that come along with it that look like anxiety and anxiety. Oh, I hate this like pressure to spell properly. On depression and anxiety, pretty common as well. Sleep issues, insomnia.
Weight gain.
Whoo, we got there. Yeah. Weight gain, amongst, there's probably others as well.
But some of those are not peri, some of those are postmenopausal.
And but there isn't a fine line. There isn't.
Right.
This is
For
what I'm
anybody.
saying. There isn't a line that does this.
And
Like
you
I
might
was,
not have everything.
you might have none. You might have some.
Mhm.
You might have some of these symptoms later on. There isn't a
Right.
fine line, and it really is such a unique experience that I think that's why it needs to be spoken about,
I was
because
gonna say that, yeah.
we're all going to go through it, but
At
we're all going
different
to
times.
at different times, different experiences in our own little unique way. I mean, think about cancer patients or anyone who's had to go through like a forced menopause.
Mhm.
Can happen in their 20s, 30s, right? If you're not able to take any estrogen, or you're having estrogen suppressing drugs, and you're forced into this, it can be a night. With the weight gain, it's not just fat, but it's fat and water. Because I'll talk about that. Okay, so these are we don't need to do any more. These are the typical symptoms that we see that can go across the spectrum, right? They go across the spectrum. Most women have most of the symptoms during the perimenopause phase. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about how you fix all of these symptoms, because I said to you, I just don't want that even to be a word used in the topic of menopause, because it's not something we need to fix, but there are some things that you can do that can help lessen the severity. There's some things you can do to help you just have a better approach to menopause, and also things that can actually just reduce them completely to zero, like when it comes to things like mental health and stuff, right? There's some really proactive things you can do, and that's sort of where, this is the reason I wrote the book, because I really want people to know that like all is not lost. Before we go on to those hacks, I want to ask this question, and I've run out of whiteboard because I just write big. I'm big in everything I do, and so, but this is, I think, one of the biggest things that women need to talk about and are a little bit afraid to talk about. And I can sort of give you a story and to start us off. So I have no fear at all, like none. Like I'm one of these people that just like, I've jumped out of airplanes, I've bungee jumped, everything. And I probably always will be. And when I was 42, I learned to ski. I always wanted to. I was an athlete, so I thought I'm gonna get on that slope and I'm just gonna be able to ski. Right, and I didn't. I was crap actually, and I was like so destroyed. I was like, what happened? It was a bit of a come down. So anyway, I realized I wasn't brilliant like I thought I was going to be, and I learned to ski. It took me 3 or 4 years, and I was adequate, like in the minimum I was adequate. So I was like a green blue slope skier. And we booked a winter holiday to Big White in Kelowna in British Columbia, Canada. We were living in Canada at the time. And I just started, and I had a migraine, so I didn't realize this was the start of my going to the hospital, trying to find out what was going on with this ocular migraine thing. And so I wasn't feeling very well, but it was fine. I knew exercise would help me, like elevate my mood and everything. And then I was going down the ski run and I came to this hill that looked like this. Like it literally looked like this, but it clearly was like this. It doesn't matter. In my mind, it looked like this. And I stood there and my husband's like, come on! And he's going down and I'm like, I hate you, you bastard! And I took my skis off and I threw them out. I was like, why did you bring me here? And I just had this panic attack. I literally had a panic attack. And I got on my bum and I scooched down this hill the whole way to the bottom, crying and hating my husband and ready for divorce. And he got to the bottom, clearly scared of me, which is always a good place for your husband to be, by the way, like just a little bit scared. Yeah, you know well. So my husband's in this like, he said, what did I do? And I was like, why would you bring me to this place? Why would you do this to me? And it was just such a horrible feeling, and I could feel my heart doing this, and I just felt so anxious. And that was an experience. I've never in my life had anxiety ever, and I was having a complete panic attack. I just felt out of my depth, literally up high. I felt out of my depth, and I just felt like this was the worst place for me to be right now. And then I spent the rest of the holiday in my bedroom, not even talking to anyone. Like I just shut myself away. And it was so, and you know how these things just feel like the worst thing in the world, but then in retrospect, like looking back, I realized that, you know, I actually lost my sense of adventure. I'd lost my confidence, and it was horrible, right? And so, as well as having anxiety, it's all part of the parcel. But, and I remember speaking to some women about this and talking to them, and they were like, yeah, me too, me too, me too. And it was one of these, I didn't mean to use the Me Too reference in that respect, but like just that they feel like they almost don't matter. They go through this phase of feeling invisible. They're going through a series of symptoms that they don't recognize, so they can't explain or articulate to their doctor. Like I said, they go to the doctor and they don't really know what to say. I'm trying to come up with a list of questions and tactics to, or even just things they can go to the doctor and say, this is it, this is how I've been feeling. But they don't feel listened to. So when I did this poll on my group, there's about 1,000 women in that, and I just did a poll, and I was like, which of these symptoms, which of these like feelings have you experienced? And being invisible was one, feeling unimportant in their family roles, and that was for a number of reasons. One of them was like the empty nesting syndrome, which is it's going to happen to me soon. I'm dreading it. The like career point, either their careers are like stalled and they felt like they weren't progressing, or they'd gone so far in their career that they felt like, now what? Like, what happens to me? Or they were stay-at-home mums and they just felt lost in their life. Their purpose was sort of, it felt strange, right? They didn't really know what to do. So there was that sort of thing happening. And then in addition to sort of like this invisibility thing, they felt really isolated. And that was mainly because they didn't know how to talk about what was happening. And one of the biggest things that has helped them with that is finding community. And they've done a study recently, I don't know if you've read it, about what helps us with stay alive longer, like what's the best thing to have for longevity, and it's community. It's to be surrounded by people. And so what happened is, this group is called Menopausing So Hard, and I literally created it, and it doesn't do anything, it just is like a repository for women to go in and go, oh fuck! Like literally, that's all it's for. And I don't give advice. We talk about the things I can talk about. There's no doctors in there, but we just talk and talk and talk about experiences and stuff. And the one thing that came out of that was that they don't feel alone anymore. They don't feel like they're going crazy, because you just feel like you're losing your mind. The one thing I didn't put on here as well is memory loss, right? Because that's another thing, that brain, the menopause, the menopause brain, and they think they're getting Alzheimer's or something, right? And so the feelings part of menopause to me is as big as the symptomatic ones. Like the personal side of it, like the feeling like they don't belong anymore, is the things they can get complete control of. And it's not unusual, right? Like to do that. I mean, how can you say to your husband, like, I just don't feel myself anymore, I'm lost, I just don't know which direction I'm going in. Like, it's like a bit of a midlife. If you put midlife in Google, it comes up, the second thing that comes up after it is crisis. It's never midlife positive, it's all crisis. And I'm like, it's not okay that's not okay, right? Because yes, this is really shitty for some people, but it's not the end of the world, and there are so many things you can do to sort of step out of that. One of the big things is like Dave doing this group, like the group mentality is such a positive thing. Think about fitness and exercise. It's so much easier to motivate yourself to come and work out when you know your friends are going to be here, you're in a supportive environment where people care, where you're not judged and you're not mocked, you know. And some of the women are going to their doctors. Well, you can mock them a little bit, like, yeah, here it was me, we get
I'm looking at you.
And so like, and some of these women are going to the doctors and they're not listened to, they're not even believed sometimes, right? So that's a really hard thing for a woman to overcome. And when you're taught to advocate for yourself and you're hitting a brick wall, it can be a demoralizing.
Well, I sort of think that, you know, I mean, as women we're raised to know that menopause is, you know, it happens at the end of your life, or, you know, toward the end of your life. And so for me at least, I started feeling, having feelings of mortality, and that, you know, oh, I'm gonna die soon. And so that kind of scared me.
Wow. Yeah, I've not heard that, but that it's exactly
so that,
what.
I mean, that, you know, I mean, I wasn't real depressed, but when I stopped to think about it, I went, oh. Okay.
And it can really knock your self-esteem. And then in addition to this, you know, we're living in a pervasive society where we have this ideal person and how they should look. And then chances are you're going to put weight on, because it's something like 85% of women put weight on during menopause. And we can talk about that a little bit, right? But so then, and then the estrogen completely impacts your skin, the collagen production, right? So like our skin changes and our looks change. We get grey hairs, we get wrinkles. They can be quite devastating for some women as well, especially when you're looking at what we should be looking like. I say burn every single magazine, unfollow, click, 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 click. Do not surround yourself or be with anyone that makes you feel less about yourself.
Just I tell you, don't say old.
But I love to say, I love being old.
Yeah, but that's
No,
so.
you said I'm getting old.
Yeah.
Well, I am, but I love being old.
But see, that's so great. It's and I'm also like the whole ageism thing. Own it. If people say to me, "Oh my gosh, you don't look so and so," which they don't actually very often, because I think that I look my age. But if they say you don't look so and so, I'll be like, "No, I do." And I think I look okay for good for my age, you know, like, you look at what, and I think that we should really just try and just change the narrative a bit. So that's one of the things I'm really focused on doing. So the whole feelings thing to me it's really interesting just the way this journey's gone, because it started off being about symptomatic things, but when it came to the crux of things, and I'm coaching people with nutrition and exercise and stuff, the meat and bones of it comes down to how they were feeling. More than anything.
My mother used to say that her 50s, 60s, and 70s were her favorite time of life because she was old enough to know that not too many things mattered and her body still worked.
It's wonderful. And so this is what I was saying about like the positives. There's some real positives you can take from this time of life. I mean, a lot of women actually, the depression and anxiety, not just from like, cause nearly everything on here is due to the decline in, I was like, I had a word in mind, I can't think of it now, the decline in hormones, especially the estrogen. Most of those are symptomatic because of that. But the, I've totally lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Just
Memory loss.
Good girl.
oh my god! Oh no, it was about the aging thing. Sorry, yeah, that's so funny. So you know, these are these sort of things that are sort of out of our control, and then one of the things like the depression side of things I was just going to touch on. Sorry, was women will mourn the lack of being able to have children. You know, that can be huge for women. Not me. I didn't even want kids, and my husband made me have two.
So that said something.
Yeah, like I was forced into it, having children. It was
That's
all
okay.
right.
Nobody talks
It
about
was
that,
all
right?
right.
There's some women that don't
No,
want.
I totally was one of them, but I love my kids. I just didn't like
Of
the whole
course, it
pregnancy
changes.
thing.
Yes.
But yeah, so but that's also part of it as well. So there's a whole psychological thing going on that really needs to be addressed, and I think that like normalizing those feelings as well is so good, because if you say, guess what, I felt the same way, then all of a sudden you don't feel as bad. So one of my things I'll say to anyone who's talking about menopause, go and talk to your friend, talk to your mum, and talk like at book club, talk about hot flashes, anything, just do it, right? Just get the conversation going, because then it's just another conversation. It's no longer taboo, and it's just out there. And like, you know, not everybody wants to be me and say all of the things that have happened. Not everyone wants to be that person, and that's why I created like a private group where they feel safe and like secure type thing, where their conversations are private. But I mean, I don't care that I don't care that when I went for a 5K run, I came back and I peed my pants. Like, I did care. I was actually devastated. But then it made me find out what vaginal atrophy was, right? So, like, there's so many different things that can happen to a woman that can just be soul destroying. Like, peeing your pants is literally going to be one of the worst things that can happen to you.
I didn't know that was so common, but what I wanted to start with was that my mom and my oldest sister had hysterectomy, so they never said anything. We didn't know what my sister, under the older one, we didn't know what to expect or anything. The doctor certainly didn't talk to you or anything, and I was in medicine anyway, and then I'm married to him. So when I went through it, I didn't know what was going on because I never had problems, you know, until that all of a sudden I was so angry, I wanted to kill him. He said, "What's the matter with you?"
You knew.
And then he
Bing, like she needs hormones.
But even then, it was hard because that was during the times that things, don't take any, because it was, which ones were the ones that were bad hormones?
Yeah,
Well,
the
there was
one
there was
that's
an
fake
equine.
hormones,
Yeah.
like Premarin and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and there was the
And he
people
said,
didn't
well,
want to
let's
take-
look around, and information wasn't out, and he
No.
couldn't even help me decide.
I know.
So I didn't take him for a while until later, then we found out to take bioidentical.
Yeah.
And so I tell everybody, and now I talk about this, and also because I didn't know about vaginal atrophy or incontinence, you know, and I'm telling my younger sister and my daughter
So
and
important.
nieces and nieces, not nephews, but nieces, what to expect, what's going on, you know, because And if they don't know and they don't talk to the doctor, that's it. There's real good books now and information to learn about it. And we talk,
And
you know.
yeah, and as well, like just knowing that that there's somebody that they can turn to if they
Mhm.
have questions as well, right? Like just even you talking to younger family members,
Mhm.
they won't feel, and clearing up all of the myths as well. There's so many myths out there about what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah.
Just clearing it and just saying, you know, like it may be people like you who do have but there's most, you know, there's a lot of women that, you know, is my husband. Hello, are you coming to listen to menopause? All right,
Food
help
for the
yourself. This is Stuart.
Hello. Hi,
Yeah.
How are you?
Okay, so so I think just like you being a voice for other family members is just like such a great way to like approach it, right? And just saying like there's help out there. You can like, we know that these things exist now, and you can you know, you can go to the doctor, or you can read some books, or you can, you know, there's loads
Talk
of
to your uncle.
yeah, I think, you know what I compare it to is about 10 years ago, the fitness world started talking about pre-post pregnancy, and then it just flooded everything, and then all these experts came on board and started talking about how to do like pre and post like natal exercise. I don't know if you say natal, pre and postpartum exercise, and what you can do, what you can't do, and now it's just normal, right? And so now I think that that's what's going to happen with the menopause. I think it's just going to be like, there's so many gym owners have contacted me because they just want to know for their clients, right? Okay, so let's move on to the hacks, right? So I call it, what are we doing for time? What is the time? Is it half past?
1:30.
All right,
There's the clock right there.
all right. I can talk, I told you, right? And you'll be
It's all
watching
good.
now. I'm like,
Yeah.
my mum used to call me
We started late.
a gobshite. Yeah, yeah. So, so what I consider to be the hacks are all lifestyle choices, right? And they'll work sometimes, and they won't work sometimes. And so I start off by saying you have to be your own detective. You just have to be, because you know, you might try something for a while and then it just doesn't work anymore. I mean, he's living proof that you can survive being with someone.
Even he survived.
Even he survived, yeah. And so, like my first, like the way I talk about the menopause is that like anything I say is like a supplementary guide to your medical advice that you get from your doctor or your gynecologist or anything, right? Like so. I also think we need to lose the stigma around HRT. I think that even HRT has changed again, right? So it isn't all equine based
No.
estrogen, which it was when you had it. It's not
Yeah,
from horses
it was.
anymore, right? And so there's bioidentical, there's HRT, there's creams, there's patches, there's tablets, there's everything, right? If you choose to take that, there's some off-the-label antidepressants that help with menopause. I'm on one. Venlafaxine is because of my depression, and the off-the-label benefits help with the hot flashes. Like so, they're advancing all the time if you choose to go down the medical route. If you choose not to go down the medical route but just want to just like get through it, which is what like I sort of feel like that's what I've done, even though I'm on an antidepressant, I'm still getting all of the other symptoms. So that's where I approach all of this. So anything I say is, to me, like I say, is supplementary to anything else that you're doing. So here's the thing, you have your estrogen and progesterone that are going to decline, right? Progesterone's going to go, you're probably going to have a little bit of estrogen in your body that your body will still keep producing through some fat cells, right? So you're going to have some estrogen, but not very much, right? But you really can't control them. They're out of your control unless you're on HRT. That's what HRT does. It takes over the work for you, right? So we have to push them aside, because there's nothing I'm going to say to you that's going to change the fact that you're going to lose all of those hormones, right? So, but what you can control are the things that are impacted by it, which are cortisol and insulin. Both of those things are impacted by estrogen. And so if we even pull those back, even just forget about the hormones themselves, on top of all of that sits stress. And what happens with all of these symptoms here, they're all exacerbated by high stress in the body. So if your body is stressed, overstressed, if it's depressed, if it's anxious, if you're having a panic attack, if you're starving yourself, if you're not eating enough, if you're overtraining, if you're fighting with everyone and letting your head spin, all of those things will make everything else worse. So the one thing you have to learn to control over everything else, in my opinion, to help reduce the cortisol levels is stress management. So like I could go on forever about that, and I know where sort of like the time is of an essence. So that's one of the big things I think that people need to focus on, and it can be done through a number of different ways. But when it comes to the fitness and nutrition world, which is sort of like my world, like one of the things I see all the time, and women will say, I don't know, I haven't changed anything, but I'm still putting on weight. It doesn't make any sense, but it does make sense, and it really does, because we just need to be a little bit more honest with ourselves, because that's one of the things. And the other thing is we also need to know what physiologically is happening with the body as we go through this. And so when you start to lose estrogen, your coping skills decline. You just can't cope as well. Like it's your happy hormone, right? It's the thing that keeps you like going. And so you're more prone to get like mental health issues with the depression, anxiety, with the memory loss as well. All of those things that can get you stressed because you can't remember words. No, I lost my words then. Like all of those things are impacted by like the lack of estrogen. So finding methodologies to help cope with that, whether it be for stress management, making time for yourself, actually stopping and doing something for yourself right now. It might be going for a walk, just being outside in nature, getting those feel-good hormones, getting the endorphins going. All of those things help. If you, I was just going to say, what happens in the group that I've got is I'll have women saying, I don't know, I'm doing CrossFit 5 days a week and I'm putting weight on, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, your body's like up there all the time. Like by nature, CrossFit is on. It's never like this. It's not intelligent exercising like this, right? It's like, Dave recommends you come 3 to 4 times a week and do this 40-minute workout, right? Is it like pretty much with your warm-up, cool down and stuff? These are doing like an hour and a half and they're on. They don't rest. Their bodies are breaking, right? And their stress levels are so high and they wonder why they're starting to put on belly fat. Their cortisol levels are like coming out their ears and their eyeballs, right? You need recovery. So during menopause, recovery is more important than ever. And I am an active recovery type person, so like on your day off, go for the walk, go for a swim. I don't swim. I don't know why I say that, because I don't swim. I don't like the water, but he swims. Like yoga, or like read a book, meditate, if that's your thing. Like find something that just brings the parasympathetic nervous system into play, the one that makes you go, like do deep breathing, like get the belly breaths going, because it really does help stress management. And if you want to take it further, if you're in a position where you really do need like help with that sort of stress management, then cognitive behavioral therapy, go to a psychologist, like go and seek that out, because at the top of all of this, the stress, if you manage that, it will filter down to all of the other things. Okay, some things we know regarding weight gain, because I know that everyone wants to know this. Like it's one of those, why am I putting on weight? And I'm heavier than like, these trousers were a bit tighter than usual this morning, but it's a fight. Like I've never had weight issues, and nothing's as forgiving as it used to be. And honestly, people talk about the metabolic slowdown and the metabolic decrease, but it really isn't that much. I mean, when you look at the number of calories that it is from, say, being at the age of like 35 to like 50, it's probably a difference of 150 calories. So we can add that blame in a little bit, but it's half a Snickers bar. Like that's not why you've put weight on. It's not just the metabolic slowdown, and I think that's really important to talk about. Water retention is huge through menopause, huge. And I noticed this myself. I remember walking down the street going, oh my God, my like thighs are rubbing. They've never rubbed. And I was like, and I know water retention is just what, we have gut issues and water bloating. It happens all the time, especially towards the end of late perimenopause to menopause. It can happen just more easy, just because our system's a little bit more sensitive. And so managing like bloating as well can be helped by regular exercise, decreased stress. It's the same things all the time. good nutrition, like cleaning the diet up, eating whole foods most of the time, like getting rid of the high sugar, processed, refined.
Yeah.
I know. Wine.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kill you here. Wine, booze. Like,
No, I hate you back.
yeah, I know. I hate you too. It's mutual. And so, like, but those things, like, if you're really struggling with it, by just focusing on like the healthy nutrition and intelligent exercise with adequate rest for stress management, with sleep, like making sure you really focus on good sleep hygiene is what they call it now, you know, like creating an environment. He hates it. He calls it like my grandma. He'll come home from work and I've got my pajamas on, my slippers on, and I'm like literally dying to go to bed so I can read my book. Like, it's just heaven for me. I love my bed, I always have. But like, it's so important to me, sleep. I can't function anymore without the sleep. And so, but the water, like if you're not hydrated enough, that's going to be impacted by it. It seems like an oxymoron, but if you're bloated, you need to drink lots of water, right? You need to hydrate your system. What we know about the nutritional side of weight gain is two things that are worth talking about. There's more, but there's two things worth talking about. We do not have the ability to process protein the way we previously did. Our system has changed, so we don't store protein in the body. Protein, you know, it's not like a carbohydrate that's there as your like reserve. But we don't have the ability to, it's called the synthesis of protein. I'm talking to a doctor, he knows. But it's like you up-regulate and you download. You know, it has to do both, and the extremes are different. And so there's certain proteins the body can't process as well. And basically the long and short of it is the whey-based proteins and the casein, the whey's like protein shakes and the yogurts and things, though that type of protein is easy for your body to process, right? So because we're not processing protein in the efficient way that we used to, it means you have to focus more on eating protein. And it's huge. Protein is huge for menopausal women, especially because you should be trying to gain muscle to support your skeletal system. Osteoporosis is 1 in 55 breaks now, hip breaks in women over 50. 1 in 55. That's huge. You ladies won't because you work out, right? You need to support your frame, and you're not going to build adequate muscle unless you have protein. And I don't like to tell people how much protein to eat, but I mean, we both are precision nutrition like devotees, and have it at every meal. I just say have it at every meal, because if I start saying have this much protein for your body weight, if I've got a 300-pound client, she can't eat like 800 grams of protein. She'll be like, can't do it. But just try and have like a palmful at every meal. I struggle. I don't like chewing my food. I'm like an old lady. I told you I wanted just like it to go down quickly. So
Me too.
yeah, I do. Like, so I do. So I do. I love like fish and stuff. I don't want to have to fish all the time, and I don't like the steaks. I know I live in Texas, and it's bad to say that, but so I do have shakes because
Our industry will go down.
it will go down because of it. But I do have the shakes because it's an easy way to get like 60 grams of protein into me. And so try and think about that every meal time. You should be
I have to have more instead of food bars.
yeah, and so like you will typically eat 3 to 4 meals a day. It's probably 3 full meals and a snack. That's typically what people need to eat in a eating window. And so at every one of those meals, try and have a bit of protein. It really does make a bit of a difference. It stabilizes your blood sugar so you don't have those big peaks, those big highs and lows. And going back to cortisol, going back to like the fat and the water, it sort of helps to sort of regulate everything as well, right? So I'll talk about it in the next bit. So the other thing, so protein is super important, and I know you hear this all the time, but after menopause, it's imperative that you really focus on it, right? That's one takeaway you can take from it. Stress management, protein. Carbohydrates, we don't have the ability to process carbohydrates. We're much more carbohydrate sensitive. Much more, and this is all hormonally based as well, right? So this is your wine, this is your chocolate. And so, let's just take one step back before I go.
I'm in trouble.
So it because this is all interlinked, it's sort of like it does this. So I've said to you, you know, your cortisol levels, chances are they're a little bit higher because we don't have the coping mechanisms in place that we used to. So high cortisol, what happens when you have high cortisol? Like, what's the term that people use? Your high stress levels, what does your body think it's in?
Fight.
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight. So when you're in fight or flight, what do you have to do quickly? Well, it sometimes freeze as well. Flee. And how do we energize our body? We have sugar. So so we need carbohydrate, we need our glycogen stores replaced, right? So if you're high stress, what type of food are you going to be craving?
Carbs.
Yeah, there you go. So cortisol equals cravings. Just remember that, right? So if you're stressed, you're going to go for chocolate. You're going to go for that whole loaf of bread with butter, right? You're going to eat them. Butter's just additional. You should. I'm saying. No, but so that's what you're just going to, and you don't even think about it because your body's not thinking. Your body's doing. I always say your body is smarter than you. Like, it knows what to do, but it doesn't need to be in that high stress zone. So that's the type of thing you can pay attention to. So what I say to clients who want to try and who I would never say don't have wine and don't have chocolate and don't enjoy yourself, because over my bread body, I'm never not gonna eat bread, right? Yeah, I love bread. And so, but just work with it, work with it in your diet. So the majority of your carbohydrates should be in the form of fruit and vegetables, always, right? That's where all your nutrients are, that's where your vitamins are, followed closely by your grains, like your whole grains, right? Not the ground down flour, but the whole grains as much as possible, right? And then after that, you've got your starches, and your starches are things like your potatoes and your sweet potatoes and all of those things, right? So, and rice, and so all of those are good, but in that order. Like, that should be like daddy bear, mummy bear, baby bear, right? And then after that, you've got the simple carbs, the sugars, all of those things that really add little to no nutritional value, but give you so much joy that imagine a world without them, right? So they should be treats, but focus on them being treats. And so say to you, I have one client who's German who says, I'm not going without a piece of chocolate and a biscuit with my tea in the afternoon. And I'm like, fine, have it, but have some protein with it. So she takes 10 almonds and has them with it. Bit of fat and a bit of protein. And so, just work it into your, so the food, as far as food wise is concerned, eat protein as much as you can, and really focus on the carbohydrates being the better on the spectrum, and then use the treat ones as treats, with no guilt and just enjoyment, right? So that's how I would go as far as food concerned. And then hydration, most people should be anywhere between 2 and 4 liters a day. I'm on that. I love my water, and I'm like a gallon of water a day, but most people aren't hydrated enough, and it's really important. I don't know if I can go into it too much more, because we've gone over it. So the main hacks I focus on then are stress management, which includes sleep, and just focusing on a few things on your diet. And they're really small things, but you have to do them all the time, consistently. And a week ago, I had 2 days where one of my meals consisted of a piece of chocolate cake like this with fresh cream on, and I just hit a wall, and I got everything came back. I couldn't sleep that night. I had too much coffee. It was awful. And it was almost like I'd poisoned myself, and it's very extreme, I'm the drama queen, but it just goes to show that when I'm on point with my food, I feel like I could take the world on. And it all comes back to managing the cortisol. So before I finish, is there any questions? I'd love to go around and ask questions, and if there's any questions about particular symptoms, and that's the one thing I can't talk about everything. The scope is just too big. But is there anything that you would like to sort of touch on that we haven't? Because you were talking about this, the vaginal atrophy. What, is that something that you've you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but you
I'll talk about it as a medical, because I didn't have a problem with it, but we went for a training with him of a new procedure, which is PRP, and that's what's PRP? I forget. Platelet-rich plasma.
Yeah.
And because he had an injection on his back for that, and I had it on my knee, and he wanted to learn how to do it, so we went to this doctor that came up with that, and he was also using that for treatment for women with urinary incontinence. And there I found out that young women, after giving birth, were having problems. I thought it was something like, because I had even asked him, when we get old, do we all get that? He said, yeah. But I never knew that it happened before then.
Yeah.
And so this treatment really helps. And I was like, well.
And is it injected straight into the walls of the vagina?
Underneath the ureter,
Yeah.
right there.
And
And
it just gives it like vitality.
Yes.
What does it do?
Yes.
And you injected the clitoris too.
All right. Oh,
Yeah.
Stu, I can have it.
And, yeah,
Do you have any in
but
your
you
bag?
love it.
Do you have any in your bag? No, I'm just joking.
You love it. It doesn't hurt.
Because it's
And
one of
lucky
those
you.
subjects that people don't want to talk about, right?
And when I found that out, and I told my sisters, this was a couple of years ago.
And it doesn't help that things that people the industry like poise or whatever
Right.
will say this is normal, so then
Right.
want to
You
do
suffer.
pants. You
And I
suffer,
was like,
get on
I
with it.
didn't want to suffer, and then
No.
I went, what, young women have this, And I told my sister, we're gonna need to talk about this, tell our family.
And
female
her
members.
sister needed to go to work with 2 changes of clothes.
And she's younger than me.
Oh,
So
that's
that she
terrible.
would get one wet, she would get.
If she sneezed,
Yeah.
She was
forget it.
sneezing
They
or
call it
laugh
they
or
call it
anything.
peasing, don't they?
Yeah,
Mhm.
so I did the treatment for her and she did.
And she's fine.
So.
Because we know from the physiological point of view, like the exercise that there's different gradients of the and prolapses and incontinence and stuff that can happen. But there's some things you can do as well exercise wise. And so for me, pelvic floor physiotherapists and with the doctor are the perfect thing, because understanding that the body works as a piston and core control is super important, so that your diaphragm. So your diaphragm sits like this, and your pelvic floor is down here, and then at the front you've got the TVA, the transversus abdominis. It's a super deep think dead bugs. When you do a dead bug and it gets super deep into your core, and then the back is multifidus. They're very internal muscles, and they work together. So when you breathe in and your belly goes out, the pelvic floor relaxes and the diaphragm relaxes. And then when you breathe out, your core engages on your back, which is those, and all this lifts up, and they work together. It's a piston, and it works together. So every time you're doing an exercise with Dave that encourages you to find your core control, you're working your pelvic floor then, and it should happen naturally, right? That should go up and down naturally. And it often doesn't. And what happens is, think about when you're pregnant. The TVA is the one that opens up to leave that gap. Your pelvic floor is compromised, and your diaphragm's so you get heartburn. And so what takes the strain? They get bad backs, right? And so then if a woman then is given the wrong information, or is forced to do sit-ups or something, and it doesn't all come back to place, one of those things can be out of sync. So working on those as well.
That's important, yeah.
So that's a huge part of incontinence, is at least try that. And breathing exercises are the thing that engage the whole thing. It's it's huge.
Did you know that? Or
It doesn't
I didn't either.
it doesn't stimulate the clitoris though, so I still need to talk to you.
But we were learning so much, and we're like, oh my God,
That's
But we're doing core exercise.
yeah, and I think that's what's happening, is everybody's saying the same thing now, and that's to me the most important thing, to know that there isn't, if I have someone saying to me, I can't stop peeing myself, it's not okay, and I'm just going to put up with it and buy poise because they've said I should and it's normal. I'm like, no, it's not normal. It's common, a lot of people, but it's certainly not normal. And say in France, for example, when you've had a baby in France, as soon as you've had the baby, you get 6 weeks pelvic floor physiotherapy. You get that as part of your pregnancy plan, so that they have very little instances of needing.
do that.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
it's
it's proactive, right? It's proactive and preventative. It's good.
That's good.
So that's it. That's everything. Was that helpful?
Yes,
Yes.
very helpful.
Very helpful.
Thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, Dave and I he keeps wanting to ask me stuff, and we can't catch each other on the phone. But if you've got any questions, or if you feel like it might be worthwhile going in this group, it's just a group to talk about different things, and it's been like really helpful for me, and I'm very honest and authentic in there. I'm like, I'm having a bad day. But what happened to me as far as symptoms went, they were really, really extreme, and they've basically got a lot less, and I'm left with a couple now that are manageable, you know. And then the positive side that's come out of it is like, I've learned to say no, and it really is amazing. Like not saying yes to everything, that's like being a bit of a gift, and also like feel like I've got a new, like a bit of a zest for life. This has given me it, like writing the book and talking about this, but I'll finish by saying that one of the terms the Chinese use, they have a completely different outlook on this altogether. Like they really revere their elders anyway, like not like this society that just completely doesn't want you to get old, but they call it a woman's second spring. And that's how they focus, and they revere the women going through it, which I love.
I've always thought in Roberto too that I want to be as healthy as I can be as I get older. You know, I don't want to be, because I've seen it in my family where they don't take care of themselves, and they should know better, because we're always preaching to them, and they wind up with diabetes, and then, you know, you start falling apart.
Yeah.
And I don't want that, so we've always
Being as healthy as
we can. But now we're learning, like I don't know if I told you, but I was telling her that we didn't understand a lot even then when I started taking hormones and trying to figure out what it was, and I told him, you need to find out more stuff about it because nobody knows.
And the advancements are great now.
Yeah.
Don't learn too much at the medical school.
No, well, it's just what you have to just keep on top of everything, right? And
continuing.
And like so for the HRT now, they know like they've done enough studies that if you take it young enough and for a short period of time, that it has no impact on breast cancer.
Yeah. And that's what I usually hear when I tell women, I was telling you should start, you know, go see your doctor and start hormones, because it helps you and you feel better and stronger, and exercise, because we know that you get osteoporosis, and Robert always says, yeah, and remember that you break your bone and you fall. You don't fall and break your hip.
Yeah.
Oh, it goes first. I didn't know that.
First,
Yeah. All right. Because
so it's real important to do core exercises.
You have your hips so
and it's always
weak.
And all
of
the
a
hips.
sudden you walking breaks, you fall.
Because it's always the hips for the women. It's their most common
Yeah,
injuries.
it's most common there, but the spine also, you know.
Yeah, the whole like the lumbar, L5 fold. Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
So we always knew that, and so I keep telling them and tell friends.
I didn't know that though, that you break then fall. I thought you. So that's no.
I don't know where I learned it, but I've known that one for a while too.
Good, so I've learned something too. Well, thank you. I got you a little water bottle and a bag to take. So you can take a little goodie bag back with you. Thank you though.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, and so so what I'm going to do when I do these next year is I'm going to just focus on sort of one sort of area, because you could dig deep